Welcome back to another episode of The Human Edge with Scott Stolze and Patrick Somers. Very excited to be back for episode 4. How you doing, Scott?
Good, Patrick. Thanks for having me. I love when we're in person, and we'll be doing that again really soon. But I also love the fact that when one or both of us are traveling, we can still get together to talk about what's a really important topic in today's world.
Yeah, very much so. I always like the in-person segments better, but with the technology we have out there, it's great that you can be anywhere in the world and come together and produce a podcast. So, with that said, this episode it's a topic that is in the headlines, but I don't know if everyone is paying attention to it. I don't know if it is resonating the way maybe it should, but basically what we're going to be talking about today is token efficiency. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, what is token and token efficiency? What is that? Well, we're going to give you some basic understanding of it, enough to know what it is, maybe some more clarity if you already have an idea. And then also talking about return on investment with AI. Some of the statistics out there are maybe surprising to some people. I think to me and you, Scott, with the conversations we have and the people we talk to, probably not so surprising. But I mean, let's get right into it. What is your whole take on this token efficiency and this poor return on investment companies are experiencing? Uber's one, Walmart is a big one.
Well, you know what I wanted to reference. Yeah, we're going to get into that. We have thankfully, some big name companies that we can refer to that I think everybody will relate to just from the mere fact that they use them, they shop with them. It's funny because number one, I appreciate that you're a data person. So some of the statistics or data that you've given me as of late in texts and this morning while we were prepping a little bit, and then so I appreciate your love for data and putting stock into what you see. And then the other thing is, when you told me a week ago that you had read something very intriguing about this topic and that let's move up, because we were going to hit this topic a few weeks down the road, and then we moved it up to hit it this week. And I did some searches, and I think you said something really important in the start of this, is that these stories are out there. How are companies, both small, medium, and large, managing the usage of AI in their organization from a compute standpoint, from a token standpoint, and a standpoint? I've seen the stories, but I almost had to go out of my way to find it because I wanted to go read more in preparation for this week. And because I almost would read them passively when they came into my feed, or I would see something on YouTube. So my point is, these stories are out there, but I think unless you're really looking for them, I'm not sure how much people are organically getting them in your feed. And let me tell you something. If you're in management in any kind of a business, you should be looking into this. Listen to this episode for sure, please. It'll do you good. And then also follow up and listen and learn what other businesses are experiencing, because it'll help you. I find it fascinating. We'll get into this. I'm going to take a breath here in a second, Patrick, but I'm reading everything from, and I'm sure you are too, plus with the data you provided, you're seeing people who are managing it pretty well. You're seeing people who are trying to understand how much can we budget for AI on an annual basis. And then the third one, the most intriguing to me, you won't be surprised, is how are companies delegating or applying, like, hey, you're in an engineering or a programming role. So therefore you should be spending X thousands of dollars in tokens or in AI usage every quarter or every year. And then somebody in another role, maybe it's a different number. Leadership's trying to figure out how to do all this as we speak, which, by the way, I think is a great opportunity for people no matter what you do, which I'd like to hit on today too.
AI, while it's newer, it's been around long enough, I believe. And there's enough people that if they're not using it directly and intentionally, they're aware of what it is. And from there's all different levels of implementation on the individual level and the business level and so on and so forth. And there's people that are working in the AI world, and that's how they make their money. And then there's people using AI just to write a better email. I think a lot of people, and our target for this is not the person out there writing code or whatever you do, right? It's the individual, the team member, the business owner, the manager, senior leadership, frontline leadership that's trying to figure out, what is this? How do we use it? And how do we help improve efficiency with this? And one of the things that some real common themes that I would just want to share that may help put it in perspective if you're a little new to AI or a little not truly understanding it. The first thing is AI is not software in the sense of it's not a Microsoft 365, right? It's not something you pay a monthly subscription to and you're good to go. Think of it as fuel. AI is fuel, right? AI makes its money like a utility company makes its money through usage. So the more usage, the more it's going to cost you. And so it's kind of like you think of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire didn't conquer the world in its day because it had the biggest army. Well, obviously the army is a huge factor, but it had efficiencies. It had roads, it had supply chains, communication, standardization, logistics. It could support and supply an army and move it efficiently, which ironically, our interstate system was designed for the same purpose for our US military to move around. And I think we lose sight of that, but it's efficiency. And if you're going to use AI, there was an analogy earlier that it would be like buying an excavator for your construction business and continuing to dig with shovels if you don't know how to use it properly. And so that's where a lot of the inefficiency comes, is it's not being used properly. And we'll get into that. But think of AI again like a utility company. So the more you use it, every time you prompt it, it's costing you tokens. And tokens are basically a measurement of usage and how you get charged. So when you get the paid programs, you get the free program of, let's say, ChatGPT, right? That is slower. It may freeze up. It does all kinds of funky things. If you're going to be using it other than the occasional rewrite this email, free doesn't really work for you. And the more higher up you go in the plans, the better it is. The more efficient it is, the faster it works for you, right? Because you've got the tokens, right? So that's really important to understand, because if you implement it into your business and you don't communicate it properly, it's not going to give you a return on investment. And I think that that's a lot of what you were speaking to and what we're seeing out there in a lot of these studies and a lot of these articles, Wall Street Journal and whatnot has them, is and that comes around communication and implementation.
It does, and Patrick, one of the reasons and things I think is dynamic and interesting about you and I pairing up on the human edge and for the work that we're doing under Take Control AI is because of your vantage point as an owner and a leader, and mine more as a one-off individual. I work for myself. I partner with a lot of people and clients and whatnot. And you know me, I love to collaborate, but I have vantage point, and you have another. So I'd like to throw this out there, and I'd love to see what your take is on it too. Such an opportunity right now for people in decision. Patrick's just described who our audience is, and it's people in management, leadership, executive positions that have an impact on what they're bringing into their organization. But I believe it's really important right now, at this early stage, because there's so much unknown. It's really important for decision makers to work with people on their team. Now, you don't need to work with everybody. That's not even practical or feasible. But I think one example, and one thing that I have heard that is working relatively well, is that some companies are appointing AI ambassadors throughout, and there's different terms you can use, but like an AI ambassador role across departments. And there's one person, obviously it's generally somebody who's enthusiastic about using AI. And that person, he or she collects information from the team and brings it back to decision makers and says, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're doing, here's what we're learning, here's what we need more of, here's what we may need to spend. So I think, people in these decision-making management roles, if you don't already, think about having different people throughout your organization, obviously dependent on the size of your business, to be in that kind of a role that can be your eyes and ears, and not in an undercover manipulative way, but just in a very transparent way. And so that you as a leader are learning, this is what makes sense for our business. And then Patrick, this is where I want to hear your take as an owner who leads a lot of people across several businesses technically, is, I think at this point, again, because we're in the early stages and people are still learning what AI even is and how it can help a business, getting input from people who are subject matter experts in your business and own and know processes inside and out, I would want to lean into them and get their input and say, is does this even make sense for us to use this type of technology here? And the last part, this is the most important part. Patrick and I encourage leaders to do this in a way that empowers people. The nuanced difference between saying, "Hey, this is something that we might be able to improve and automate." I don't know. It might have an effect on your role down the road, or versus, "Hey, you know what? Can you go out and find a way we can improve this process and automate some things and save some money or improve efficiency in a way that's going to help customers? And if you do that, it's going to open up so many other doors for you in our company. Can you go do that, please?" Like, that's a massive difference. So that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm promoting. And I'd love to get your take as an owner, how practical and efficient you think that is, Patrick.
Well, I believe that you definitely need to lean into others, especially others that have been where you wanna go or have attempted what you wanna do. It's why peer groups are so popular, right? Because you learn from each other. And so if you have somebody in your industry or even outside of your industry that has experience implementing and using a lot of these tools, by all means, you lean into them. You take their experience, you take their victories and their failures and their challenges, and you figure out how to navigate it into your organization, avoiding some of the pitfalls because you know about them, right? You know about them. It's like navigating. If you have a map and you look at a map and you're like, I'm going to journey and I'm going to go on this journey. I'm going to use this map. That's fantastic. Until you actually get out there and you're traveling in the journey and you find out the terrain does not match the map, right? In fact, there's a whole principle in special forces and in the military about navigating, land navigation, and it's something to the effect of, match the terrain, right? I can't if you're listening out there, and you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But if the map says this, but you get out there, the terrain's different, follow the terrain, right? And so if you now imagine, let's go back to the map scenario, the military. If you have guides that have already been on that journey and know, yeah, this is what the map says, this is the terrain, this is where you're going to really want to not go that way, you want to veer this way, do that, doesn't mean that the journey is going to be flawless, but it's going to be better than it would be if you didn't have that insight about what you may encounter. You can better prepare for it. That's the same thing in business. That's the same thing in life. That's why mentorship is so important, and being able to lean into people that been there, done that, or are doing it. Doesn't mean they've arrived, but they're on the journey and they're maybe a little bit ahead of you, a little bit more experience in you, whatever it may be. And that's why it doesn't have to be the same industry. Because look, one of my mentors, Frank Harrison, who I bought my business from, always used to tell companies, they'd come up and they'd be like, oh, one day I want to get to your size and da da da. And they were starting out, they were smaller. And he said, look, and then they would tell about all the challenges. And he would always say, we have the same problems. There's just more zeros after my problems, right? Which means you have the same problems. They're just bigger problems. And so that's why if you're big, I as a larger company, I learn from smaller companies. Smaller companies learn from larger companies. And so whether it's AI or anything else, lean in and get the expertise of the individuals to make your journey smoother.
Patrick, you and I think I have referenced about one time an episode. We've known each other a few years now, and it's so interesting to me. It's so interesting. I just want to share one thing about what I observed with you, and then we can get back to some of what the companies are doing and where people. Because one of the missions or objectives of this episode is to give people some guidance on where to be looking to learn from. I love your point about looking at peers or leaning into peers. One thing that struck me is you're a type A, you're a high driver. You're almost in some ways a force of nature. Yet I can attest to anybody who hears this, if you don't, some of you may know Patrick personally, many do not. He absolutely does that. I mean, since I've met you, you've always been part of peer groups, and you're always telling me. I feel like every other month at most, I'm hearing about some peer group meeting you attended, another one you're joining, or even a trip that you all go on so that you can get away and share ideas and stories and learn from each other. And I agree. 2 weeks ago, I sat in a meeting in Phoenix that was leaders of businesses. I was fortunate to be there, and there was one person. It was about 12 people, and there was one person in the room who stood out above above all others. And the reason he stood out, and he was really smart. It was very obvious, but the reason he stood out when we were talking about a number of AI related topics was because he asked a lot of questions. What he did was, instead of saying, no, this is how you should do it, because there were 3 or 4 people who were doing most of the talking and saying what they're doing in their company. This gentleman, instead of saying, no, this is what you should do or what I'm doing, you know what he did? He framed everything around a question. He said, well, what about if you did it this way? Or what about if, here's what I've seen over here. Have you ever, I'm telling you, if you go out in this world and as you're learning more about AI and the impact of it and how you can use it in your business, if you can frame a lot of those conversations around questions, you're going to do really well. So I really wanted to emphasize that point you made, Patrick, because I think you're right. A lot of decision makers should be leaning into peers who have already gone down that road. And maybe you have more to share on that front. And I'd love to hear what you're seeing in some of these bigger companies, because I think one of the good lessons we can start putting out there is pay attention. Like, as massive as they are, the Walmarts and the Ubers of the world, they affect so many people. And I think for that reason alone, it's good to keep an eye on what those companies are doing on the AI front.
To to follow back on to something you just talked about and the guy who asked questions, I will tell you, I've been to a lot of classes, business, firefighting, diving, all these different things through my life. And there's always one person in there, and sometimes more than one person, that wants you to know how smart they are. And they're always participating in a way so you know that they're the smartest guy in the room. And what that guy just did is something my wife does really well. Being in the medical field, she is really sharp. And she goes into these trainings, and a lot of times she could teach the material, but she'll ask questions just like you explained. Like she doesn't know anything. And she ends up being well liked, favored by the instructor, right? Because the worst thing to do is, because I facilitated courses, is try and teach something, and you got the guy in there, or the gal that's just that wants to build their confidence and let the world know they're the smartest one in the room. That humility, you learn something new because you ask questions, and even if you're asking the question in a way to bring attention to a topic without you being the smartest person in the room, you learn something yourself. You also teach something, and you do it with humility. So I think that that's a really good take. And I will tell you real quick, if you're watching this on YouTube, you could see, because here we are doing a thing on AI, we're talking technology, but all my notes are here laid out in front of me. And you'd think, why does he not have a laptop? Why is this guy not using technology for his notes? And as much as I love technology and I embrace technology, there's certain things like paper. I've tried the note-taking apps. I've tried all of that. I'm a legal pad guy. I'm a print it out and read it guy. I still buy books. I like the smell of books. I like the feel of a book, right? And so, anyways, I just wanted to share that because I'm thinking, here I am. I'm using all this technology to produce this podcast with you. I use technology all the time. We're talking about technology. And here I am. People are probably watching like, what is all this paper in front of him? But that's my old school way. So, Scott, real quick, as we get into talking about some of the takeaways from these companies, I do want to go back to, because in my notes here, I do have a pretty good description. I talked tokens, and that's what they use to charge you. But basically, I just want to go a little bit deeper into a token. All right. So imagine AI is charging by the word. Okay. So it doesn't actually count words, it breaks language into chunks called tokens. Roughly 750 words equals about 1,000 tokens. And so every question you ask costs tokens, every answer costs tokens. Reading a document costs tokens, writing emails costs tokens, generating code costs tokens. Basically, everything that's done costs tokens. And so I have a bunch of these apps I've built, and I have these super agents I use. I get a digest every Sunday morning of all of my business's websites performance, and then all of the social media performance. Automatically, this AI super agent goes in, crawls, pulls it, puts it together, texts it to me. Well, all of this costs tokens. So I'm like, well, man, how do I know what's using a lot of tokens and what's not? So then I built an app that monitors everything I have and how much tokens it's using. And there's a budget for everything. And so that's how I monitor it, because it can get really expensive, as some of these companies have found. And I wanted to check this out, Scott. I want to read this, and I want your take on it. So most AI failures are not technology failures. They're leadership, communication, training, and implementation failures. McKinsey and Company found that nearly every company that is investing in AI or is investing in AI, yet only 1% consider themselves mature in AI adoption. And I think a few episodes back, you talked about aerospace company that is not really using AI, or at least not on any large scale. The conclusion was particularly interesting. Employees are generally more ready for AI than leaders realize, and leadership is often the bottleneck to scaling AI successfully. Most people think, or most CEOs think, people are resisting AI. But McKinsey's research suggests leadership hasn't created the roadmap.
I feel like you and I are here today doing what we're doing because of that very reason right there. That's why we're doing this. So we've given some of the background already in early episodes, and happy to share more of it naturally going forward. But that's why Patrick and I are here. And it doesn't surprise me in the least. I love when you bring a little bit more than anecdotal evidence to the table, which I tend to do a lot of. You like I said earlier, you lean a lot in the data. That's, to me, that's astonishing information. That, and I'm not, I can be hyperbolic, but I also am not fazed by a lot of things in this world. That blows my mind. But at the same time, it reaffirms why we're doing this. The problem is not the technology. We do need to learn it better and keep refining and enhancing it. And then, of course, as it's adopted into and implemented in organizations, you need to improve that process. The biggest problem though right now is everything Patrick just laid out. It's how are people communicating, sharing, painting that vision, painting that picture. That's why we're here. Man, if people get two things out of, I do want to say, I think the point that we both made a few minutes ago is really go in the meetings and ask questions, and you can frame your knowledge into and blend it in, fine. That is a way to not only learn, but you can endear, more people are going to want to work with you, guaranteed. Take that to the bank. The other thing is what Patrick just laid out, and think about that. Because here are two big things. And then, Patrick, I'll take a pause. Number one is if you're feeling bad or behind or stressed, like, man, I have to catch up. What did he just say? You're not that behind. Number one. So don't feel bad. The best time to start is today, tonight, tomorrow, etc. And then number two is this, in my view, affirms the need for people to collaborate and work together. Because anybody who thinks they can go in and be, I'm going to choose how we're doing this, or I'm going to have, the front leading. I mean, maybe you do by hierarchy of title, you're that front top of the line person in the AI space in your company. But if you're not collaborating and working with a lot of people and learning together, you're in big trouble. Because that's what that data is saying is that people need to communicate and learn together and formulate the plans and the strategy and build it out. Whether it's 2 or 10 of you or 100 of you, don't go about this alone because you're just going to create more problems for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true with just about anything. There's usually a implementation problem, a communication problem, a messaging, delivering the vision properly so everybody's aligned. And so check this out: AI spending is exploding, ROI isn't. This is an IBM CEO study. It found that only about 25% of AI initiatives deliver the expected return on investment. Only 16% have scaled enterprise wide despite enormous investment. 3 out of 4 AI projects are not producing the return leadership expected, not because the models don't work, because organizations struggle to operationalize them.
Yeah, that set of data was more interesting. I think the first set was kind of moved me. That information's more interesting and I feel like informative. So Patrick, yesterday, I did a post on social referencing a business model that I saw this on X, a business model that somebody does where they build agents and then support and maintain the agents for a business going forward. This begs the question of, forget my post for a second, but tell me your take on this, because I think it's very related to what we're talking about right now. How much should people be leaning into that third-party expertise? I'm all for doing it in the near term. Maybe you do it for 3, 6, even 12 months, but are you finding that businesses, as they get their arms around this more and more, should they be bringing all that oversight internal? Would you lean into third? I know you're already working with some, at least for the technology itself, but don't you think for the maintenance and management would you bring that in-house, or what's your take on that in 2026?
So it's interesting you bring this up because I have a business owner who reached out to me. He's been working with a company that will basically use AI, build him his proprietary custom software to do what he wants done. And what the cost to build it is not what's staggering. The ongoing monthly costs to maintain it is staggering. And so we're having conversations around it because he's like, this is like, so there's a lot of questions you got to ask. Like, okay, if they're building you something proprietary, how proprietary is it? Right. So in the proposal, there's nothing in there that's basically, this is just yours. We will not duplicate this or do anything outside of this to benefit other people, maybe change it or whatever. They're going to learn from what they're doing for you. Right. But then if they're the outside third party and you decide you want to part ways down the road, you can't, right? How does that work? That's those are the questions going through my head versus do you hire that software engineer? There's going to be a lot of software engineers looking for jobs because the companies that typically were hiring them don't need as many. So it's going to be a tough market to find a job in compared to how it has been previously.
But
Because
Patrick,
AI is writing the code, right? You need somebody that can think and what do I want, but you're still gonna need that person, and I do think we're moving to where more businesses are gonna have their proprietary operating systems, and they're gonna have to have that person in-house that is, has a degree in computer engineering or coding or whatever it may be. Otherwise, you're gonna have all these different so that's one piece of technology for the business. Companies are gonna get they're gonna get to the point where they're spending so much on technology, and that's where the return on investment's not happening. That's where the challenge is coming from.
is it irresponsible of me to say, because I don't have that kind of skin in the game, that businesses need to take their lumps for 1 to 2 years so that they can learn where they're going to find the ROI? I remember I worked in software early in my career for a couple of software outfits, and I was working with a lot of clients. I'm not technical, but I was managing relationships with clients, and I mean, this is in the early 2000s, and SaaS was becoming a big thing, and a lot of a lot of major companies were outsourcing the oversight and management even of their data. That's part of what we did. So there was some of that risk there because you had outside entities, so to speak, that were getting a lot of insight into internal information, et cetera. But at any rate, I do remember seeing and observing with several clients that they were willing to take a stretch of time where they were learning where they can get the most bang for the buck, pardon the cliche. Is that even feasible to say to an executive who's got his or her, so to speak, their job on the line? Like they have to turn around in 6 months and report up to the CEO or the CFO or whomever. Here's where I'm seeing the ROI. Like maybe it's simply self-preservation where leaders are not going to want to give them a runway, give themselves a runway to learn this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question. I know what I can tell you is as a business owner, when you go to these conferences and trade shows, I went from probably 12 to 18 months ago, there's maybe 3 or 4 AI type companies there, to now 60% of the vendors are AI in some form. And this AI, it's not inexpensive. And a big reason is the tokens, right? It's easier for somebody to build something. I had one software company or they help with pricing and they design all this and that, and I wanted this app for my sales team to do heat load calcs is what you need in HVAC. He's like, "Oh, we can do that. We can work on that for you." And he was very excited because he realized that I'm telling him there's a need for this. And while there is some out there, there's nothing out there that I was envisioning that was working like I wanted to. And of course, he wants to develop it. He wants my input because now he can go market this to other companies, right? And because he services the trades, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's capitalism. But I was like, wait a minute, maybe I can build this. I literally was at a conference, standing, listening to a keynote in the back, typing my prompts, and literally built this thing in probably 45 minutes. And I've been testing it in the field. My business partner has been using it, and he's like, Pat, I'm cross referencing it. It's accurate. It's working. It's like this is unbelievable. This is amazing. But so I just built that versus going to a company and having to pay. Now I have to pay the tokens, that are used in it, but I'm not paying the management and the this and the that. Now, as it gets bigger and bigger and there's problems and there's bugs and everything like that, that means that's going to take my time and attention. So that's where somebody in-house could really pay off. But my thing is, I think companies, I guess what I would say is if I was looking at software, if I was like, I had a CRM and I'm like, there's a lot of people out there talking to me about their CRM, and I think I do need a better CRM. Right now is not the time I'm going to decide to leave what I'm doing unless it's failing me miserably. Hell, I might even go back to pen and paper and old school processes because what I don't want to do is go spend a lot of money and get locked into something. Because once you get into these things, they're like lobster traps. They're easy to get into and they're hard to get out of. Right. So it's almost like I think there should be pause and a company really has to evaluate what it wants to do, what direction it wants to head. What is the ROI? Stephen Covey, 7 Rules of Highly Effective People, or 7 Laws, whatever it is, of highly effective people. The first 3 I apply all the time in my business and personal life. And I think when it comes to this, begin with the end in mind, right? Seek first to understand, then be understood. Think win-win, right? That may not be in the exact order, but when you're looking at what am I going to do when it comes to AI and implementation in this software or this process or this super agent, begin with the end in mind. What is the end, right? Begin with the end. What do we want to accomplish? Where are we going? Seek first to understand, then be understood. That's where you got to go to your team and understand, and your customers and your vendors, and understand them and what they're missing and what they want and what they need, and then be understood, right? And then think win-win. How do we all win here? How does everybody win? We always do a triple win. Our team members, the customer, clients, the company. If any one of those is not winning, we can't make that decision. 2 can't win and 1 lose. It just doesn't work. So anyways, with that said, because we're running a bit long here as our episodes go, but
Patrick,
there's so much to cover. And I want to hit a couple more things real quick, if I may.
yeah, please do. But I got to come back to one thing you just said that is a golden takeaway from this episode. But yeah, please continue.
So it's one of the strongest themes across Deloitte, McKinsey, and enterprise studies is this: companies buy AI and then try to bolt it into existing workflows. That goes back to begin with the end in mind, right? You're trying to take this technology and use an existing workflow. That doesn't work. That doesn't work in most cases. You're using this technology, it's totally going to change your workflow. Totally going to change it. They don't redesign jobs. That's why you lose jobs, because the job's not being redesigned. How do we redeploy this position? It's not going to be the same position, but it doesn't mean that it goes away. They don't redesign accountability. Research cited from Deloitte found 84% of companies have not redesigned jobs around AI. So they're just bringing it in, they're bolting it on, and they're frustrated it's not working. That's a communication issue. That's a begin with the end in mind issue. So here's the Walmart. Walmart, giant company, right? It's amazing the story started with Sam Walton and where that company is now. The Walmart story is not about token or token efficiency, although they have a huge issue with it and why they're not getting return on investment. But it's not the cost of tokens or anything like that. They have their own proprietary AI platform, obviously a company like that, but it's about management and deployment. Walmart discovered employees were generating duplicate AI work and repeatedly asking the same questions, creating unnecessary AI expense. The company responded with usage controls and greater emphasis on training and proper uses, right? So imagine an employee's asking a question and then the same employee asks the same question down the road, or a different employee asks the same question. And to me, I'm like, well, AI should pull these questions and start creating a database and so on and so forth. But, that wasn't thought about. They didn't begin with the end in mind. All right. Employees will resist if you communicate it poorly. One recent study found 29% of employees admitted sabotaging AI rollouts, not because they hate technology. They fear job loss, increased workload, lack of transparency, and lack of trust. The study concluded that clear communication and involvement of employees are critical to success adaptation. That's like, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Study.
Let me know do you have any more data to share, or can I chime in?
I mean, I could be here all day with data. I mean, it's so abundant. But
It is.
no, I think that we got to save something for other episodes.
Yeah. Well, so my head is spinning in a good way. All right, I'll work backwards a little bit. I know we don't have a lot of time. How is any of what Patrick just said? How is any of what you just said the last 2 minutes? None of that is surprising. So one of the value adds of me, if you don't know my background, is I worked in several big companies, corporations. So I have that experience, and I've seen a lot of this. And I think a lot of what I learned in 20 plus years in those environments is immensely valuable in what the landscape is presenting to us today with AI and technology, especially as it relates to people and culture and how to make things work. Because clearly Patrick's laying out data and examples of what's not working yet. See, to me, that's okay. It's so early. I'm not surprised by any of this. And for anybody who's worked in even a mid-sized company, none of this would be all that shocking. It's like, yep, that's how it works. These are the breakdowns. These are the gaps in communication you see. Patrick, I'm just telling you, listening to you the last few minutes, and I know you're going to do this. It's what we do. It's what you do. You, number one, to the audience, please re-listen to this episode. This is the one. This is one you should really re-listen to. Share it for sure with others because there's some really great insight here. And I know, Patrick, you're going to cut this up. There's going to be some clips you get out of this conversation with what you reference that people need to see. And I know you and your team will pepper and put it all out there. That's awesome. I'm excited for that because this is the kind of stuff that's really impactful right now. If you're reading similar data a year from now, then I'd be concerned. But I'm not surprised, nor am I concerned. And then the last thing I would say is I worked my way backwards is please, and then I'm done, Patrick. What Patrick said earlier, he was referencing Stephen Covey, but I know he operates this way anyway. Look at what the end result you want is to be or supposed to be and work your way back. It's like that whole, reverse engineering philosophy. That's exactly right. So I think you provided another gem from this episode. If people take nothing away from ask good questions and lean into people and think you're not behind, and also what is it you're looking to build, produce, or get as an end result, and then come work backwards. And if the management team and the people working on it can all agree that that's where we're going, because you turn on CNBC, my gosh, if you're not in the next IPO or, investing all this money and getting in on the big bonanza that's coming, people feel like, oh my God, I'm not part. No, you are part of it. You use it every day and just build it within your company and you're all going to reap rewards. But start, to Patrick's result, from the end result and work backwards. That's it. I'm done.
That was well said. Uh, you know, it in anything you do, personal or business, but especially in the business context, because sometimes there's more at stake because it's involving other people. A lot of times, what I see, and I'm guilty of, is a launch without a plan. So I'm really good at the vision and the destination. And I can visualize and I know how something can be accomplished or how we can get there. It's just something that I don't know if I developed it or I don't know. But like I would literally go at the general, I would go back into our area where sales lead coordinators are, install coordinators, permitting, all of these teams working together. And there was chaos. This was years ago, 10 years ago or more. And I went in there and I put a chair in the center of the room and I just sat there. I sat there for about 6 hours. And when I came out, I could see where all the issues were. It was as clear as day to me. And I was able to create a system and a process and a roadmap. That's one area where it went really well. Other times I see the vision and I know where we need to go, and I don't paint a clear enough roadmap and explain enough whys. Now I've gotten better at it over the years, but it's something I see quite a bit because especially with leaders that are visionaries because they can see how to get there. And they're not too worried about how to get there. They're not worried about the hangups or the challenges. They just expect that as part of the journey. But you have to understand you have a team that you're leading that doesn't have that same ability and can't read your mind. And so that's why anything you roll out or implement has to be you have to have the end game in mind. You have to communicate it. You have to communicate the whys. And there may be a lot of people listening to this that are saying, "Yeah, no kidding. Tell us something we don't know." Well, surprisingly, I've worked with a lot of companies. I've learned from a lot of companies, and I've been on my own journey with multiple companies, and it happens a lot more than one might think. And so now you bring in a new technology or a newer technology like AI. It's literally like the next industrial revolution. I mean, that phrase got booed at a college commencement address because these poor kids had just spent all this money, took on all this debt, and now they realize, man, I'm my role, I don't want to say it's being replaced, it's being changed. What it looked like when they started that degree is now totally looks different. And that's where you have to adapt. And adapting is communicating. understanding, and constantly communicating. You can't just communicate the end game and the vision once. You have to constantly communicate it every single day. You have to use every touch point as a way to somehow talk about the outcome and the goal. And what I want to share as we close this episode out is Scott and I are doing this podcast, which we hope you enjoy. And if you do, if you could like it, comment, share it, it would be greatly appreciated. We also built out a website, takecontrolai.com, controlai.com. And if you go there, there's absolutely no charge. You can take an AI assessment. You can also share it with your team, and your team can take it. And it's going to give you a report on yourself. And if your team takes it, if you share it with your team, it's going to give you a report on you as a company, how your company sees AI, who's using AI, who's not using AI, who's fearful they're going to lose their job over it, who's fearful it's going to create more work or confusion. See, if you have those insights, that's the terrain. You may have the map, and the map is I'm here and I want to go here, but you don't know the terrain. We talked about this earlier in the podcast. You have to know the terrain. And how you know the terrain is you either experience it as you go through it, which can be painful and teach you a lot of lessons you probably don't want to learn, and it can be costly. Or you find a guide. You find a guide who knows the terrain and let them take you through. And it doesn't mean it's going to be flawless. Still going to have some challenges. But if you have the map and the coordinates of where you are and where you want to go, and you have a guide that can show you the terrain, it makes all the difference in the world. And if you go to takecontrolai.com and you take that assessment, it is going to give you a read of the terrain, and it's going to give you the areas you need to focus on. And if you really want a guide, that's where Scott and I come in. We will walk you through the results. We will talk with you. We'll even come on site and talk with your team. We'll help you build out a plan, and we'll be there by your side during the rollout. And why is that worth an investment from you and your company? Well, the statistics we read from much bigger, larger, sophisticated companies out there that are finding challenges. That's why. And if you just want to take the assessment and never hear from us again, then take the assessment and walk away with the insights from it. If you want to set up a call, we'll set up a call. If you just want to listen to the podcast, by all means, listen to the podcast. We hope you enjoy it, and we hope you get something out of it. And with that said, Scott, unless you got any final words, I think we can wrap this one up.
I'm not topping that. That was fantastic.
Well, hey, Scott, love doing this with you, man. Love doing the podcast. Love talk. It's something that we're both passionate about, but we're not experts in. But we've been on our own journeys, and we're on our own journeys. I'm currently on the journey with 3 separate companies, and you're actually on that journey with me. I'm helping guide and implement and create the plan. So we're not just using takecontrolai.com for others. I'm implementing it in my 3 companies. So with that said, thank you for listening. Hope you got something out of it. Until next time, stay connected.